Okay, I'm super excited right now because I know nothing about what you three really do, but I'm super interested in it.
Okay.
And Kyan, Yasmin, Delna. Delna I've known for a very long time. And I worked extensively with you when you were heading Tata Motors and organizing things, and cars were launched, and it was an amazing experience working with you, and I know how well you get things done. But things have changed, you've moved on, you've done so much more. So now I've got lots of questions for you all from different fields. Kyan, I want to talk a little bit about you because your journey has been one which has also been very brave. And then you have done what a lot of us hope we'll one day get to do. And there is thousands and thousands of people with forgotten dreams and thoughts, and which are discussed in drawing rooms, but no one takes them forward. And hopefully through chatting with you, people can get educated and also inspired to maybe take on something that they truly are passionate about.
Sure.
I got notes.
Okay.
And they're not in my handwriting, so I can actually read them. No, so you walked out of like in India, no matter who you are, safety first is what comes from parents,
Absolutely.
family, everyone else. And risk-taking is really now culturally sort of becoming something that people look up to a little bit. But earlier it was like, stupid person, why would he do that? He had everything perfect, right? You walked out of a corporate job, super safe there, to chase a startup dream. Tell me a little bit about, what got you to do that, where you were, and how you even decided to take that plunge.
Sure, thanks. I think it's a very important question, from the point of view of why someone actually does these things. So I think for me, it was just that it was the right time. I was basically going through sleepless nights almost, where I felt like there was this urge or this craving inside me that I have to do something different. And you're absolutely right, like nobody else in the family, or at least in the family that I knew of in the last few generations, had taken that opportunity to do something. Everyone had that salaried job. So it was definitely something out of my comfort zone. And when I first decided, when I told my folks and family and friends, close friends, that I'm going to do this, I think 9 out of 10 or probably 99 out of 100 called me an idiot, and they said, look, you're going to crash and burn and fail, and you're going to die a horrible death.
Wow, what an encouraging setup to come from.
Very, very, absolutely. I love my friends and family, but I think that there was that, like I said, that desire, where I would sometimes literally wake up in the middle of the night thinking, is this what I want to do? And the stress of getting like late night calls from people around the world. Cadbury, when I was working at Cadbury, with due respect to Cadbury, I learned a lot there, but I felt like this wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore. And of course you worry because no one's ever done it, no one that you know has ever done it, and you hear of all these success stories, but you also know that there's a large proportion of
you also did that, but
stories.
you had children. I mean,
Yes.
very often people, that's something.
So I think the thing was, like, a few years before I had kids, I was really thinking about it and I didn't do it. And then, when the kids came along, I was like, I want to set something up for them as well in the future. I want them to be interested in sports, something that I was very passionate about. I believe sports does so much for so many people, brings so many people together, and just makes you the person that you are. So I thought, like, I need to lead from the front. I need to show my kids this is what you could do with your life. So I took the plunge. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how old were you when you took the plunge? On a personal level, where was your life at that point?
So I was about 33 or 34. So I wasn't young per se, but I think that it was important because I had all that experience behind me. I had a lot of years of international experience. I was very fortunate that I was able to study abroad in a university where 50% of the students were foreign students, 50% were Americans. So I had that exposure. That taught me a lot, showed me sports in the US. And in the US, whenever they do everything, they do it so much larger, right? The marketing aspect and everything. So taught me a few things from there as well. And then when I was with Cadbury, I obviously spent a lot of time in Africa because I was based out of South Africa, and then Egypt, Swaziland, so all these fun places. And wherever I went, I try to set up like a little sports event, So I did like
Wow.
a cricket championship. In
when you were
Swaziland.
when you were in the corporate job.
Yeah.
So it was
because
already there. It
It's
was
already there, and I was like, okay, I'm not making any money doing this, so maybe I should actually start doing it as a thing, So yeah.
And then you decided, you quit and you started a company. Tell us a little bit about what you started and where.
Yeah, so it was. I mean, I hope someday someone makes a nice little movie on it because it was a nice story, And I think so at least, And I think that it was just one random day that I said, okay, I've had enough, and like we started. When I say we, it was me and a bunch of people that I knew who had grown up playing with, like cricket coaches, etc. So I just said, listen, let's start coaching cricket at Cross Maidan. So literally the first 3 people who sort of showed up were 3 of my friends, and they sent their 3 little kids to me. Like they're the only ones who had faith in me. Said, okay, we've seen this guy walking around with a cricket kit and he looks like he knows how to play. So let's send our kids to him. And so we started on the 11th of January 2013 at Cross Maidan, I remember. And much to my happiness, the next day there was 3 kids, brought like 3 more kids, and it started growing.
Wow.
And I think by the summer of 2013, by May 2013, we had about 80 kids in the academy at Cross Maidan. So it was growing, and I think so there was nothing new in what I was doing, right? There was no, I mean, people have been coaching at Cross Maidan and Shivaji Park and places like this for ages. We've got some great players like, Sachin, Vinod, etc., who've come out through those. So it's not like I did anything new, but I think what I did was I was very good at communicating with them and telling them where their kids are going, with what we're trying to do with them. And I think that made a difference. So we brought a sort of new age feel to a relatively old practice of coaching kids at cricket.
A sort of reinvention of what was already there.
Yeah, exactly.
And redesigning
Exactly,
it.
exactly.
So from about 3 or 6, suddenly you got about 80 kids.
Yeah.
And then the parents were also there.
Yeah. So actually that, Cyrus, there was this eureka moment one day I remember when there was this dad, and he was, like in India, typically when your kids are coaching or, the parents are always hovering around the kids, and this dad like found his way, he sort of snuck his way behind the net. And another interesting thing about the Bayside Cricket Academy was that we actually had a lot of girls who had taken up the sport at that stage. So this dad was with his daughter, and he was, obviously communicating with her, and he was saying, beta, arm aise hona chahiye, chin aise hona chahiye. He was very technically correct about the sport, So I looked at him, I watched him, and he saw me looking at him, he moved away. Then when I wasn't looking, he again moved back. And then, and then at the end of the session, I walked up to him, so he sort of took a step back, where I thought I was going to come and scold him for like being there. But honestly, I wanted to just talk to him, and I asked him, so did you play, previously? And, like any typical Mumbaiker who's worth his or her salt, he said, oh, I was so good, I could have played for Mumbai and I could have played for India, like if I had kept going. So I said, why did you stop? So he said, well, priorities take over, family. Life happens, like I can't play cricket and earn a living, right? So I have to earn a living another way. So, and family happened. So I said, what if I created an event for you? And he said, no, my, my company keeps calling me to play, but nahi, interest nahi hai abhi. And I went back home that night and I thought, like, shit, I got to get these people back, I have to get these people back. And so the way I thought of doing it is I remember the bond between the child and the parent. And I said, what if I created something called a school dads cricket championship, where the father of every school gets together with other fathers from the same school, and we make it very strict rules, regulations. You have to be from the same school. You have to be 33 plus age group, because when you're young, it's unfair towards the older population than with sports, especially. So we created this concept called the School Dads Cricket Championship. We started with 4 schools in 2013, and like now, fast forward 13 years later, 12 years later, we've had like every year a championship, and we've had I think the number now is we've had almost 50,000 school dads, amateurs who've played this tournament.
Wow.
So now
Yeah.
you're representing your kid's school.
Yeah,
in a
so
way,
you
and
represent-
competing.
You represent your kid's school, and it became and I think it was growing with WhatsApp and Instagram at the same time. So we started putting it out there, and people were like, "Wow, look at me! I'm the Virat Kohli of my kid's school, right?" So and the other
Beautiful.
thing,
That's beautiful.
Well, and what we realized is like levels were different. There were some dads who had been playing recently who had stopped. There were others, like you mentioned earlier, when we were chatting, that some people were coming back after 15 years, right? So these guys needed coaching and stuff. So our academy helped them get back in shape. And what I realized is if we kept one winner, it's no use. So we broke it up into a platinum, gold, silver, and a bronze champion. So even the bronze champion, after losing the league games, they had a chance to win the bronze championship.
Right.
So they would take the bronze trophy and go to the school and put it up there. And the kids didn't care, right? Because the kids were like, my dad won a trophy.
Right.
And then the moms came to us. The moms said, what about us? So, we are a very inclusive company. And so we decided we'll create the school mums throwball championship, because throwball is something I remember growing
A lot
up.
of the girls played throwball in
Everyone, they
school.
were really good at it.
Yeah,
very good at
so it was
Some-
a sport for women at
Very
that time.
good. So we did the throwball women's championship. We did dad's football, because many dads said, I don't care about cricket, I want to play football. So
Correct.
we did a dad's football. We did
That's
anything
so
and
good.
everything
You have
with
that
parents.
variety.
Yeah.
When you have something for knitters, please call me.
Yes. We should make the
Lazy.
No, it is not.
In 10 more years, we'll have a glove.
school dads knitting championship coming up.
Send the trophy home.
Yes.
We understand you don't want to move much.
Yeah.
But you know what's also beautiful about this idea?
Yeah.
I find sport helps you connect with, like, a lot of parents and kids don't have that communication.
Yeah, exactly.
And it sort of neutralizes it and you form a bond
Yeah.
through an activity,
Yeah.
which is rare in India. It barely happens,
Yeah.
because everyone's so busy. And the second most amazing emotional thing I think that what your idea did is, I think there are hundreds and thousands of forgotten dreams.
Absolutely.
And sport is like only these people, this percentage can be professionally employed and actually make a living. And so this is like a beautiful reliving of a dream and the amount of joy it brings. to
Yeah.
people.
I mean, like, just I remember the 10th anniversary of our championship. We decided to go big, So we had the finals at the DY Patil Stadium,
Right.
and at the finals, this one of these players, the man of the match of the tournament, he actually said that in 2008 I was a ball boy here during the first IPL finals. And he said in Hindi, मैंने God को एक ही wish किया था कि मुझे एक दिन यहाँ पे match देखने के लिए आना है, like to see a match
बिल्कुल.
properly. But as luck would have it, not only did I watch, I played, and I'm the man of the match in the finals, right? So I think that really stuck to me. And
So things were just on the rise right now. And then you got funding from Anand Mahindra.
yeah, so it was on the rise, but obviously there were the daily struggles, right? Like when you're a bootstrap company, like you don't know what's going to happen by the end of the month. So you have to pay salaries, like you have coaches, you have a team suddenly. So there were always challenges for the first 4 years. And then, yes, we sort of, our sort of business case came to Mr. Mahindra's office. And when he looked at it, he looked at us as this company which was doing so much to bring people back to sports, as we've discussed. So he was very excited about it, and he called me in for a meeting. We had a half an hour slot that was blocked off, but he's such an amazing person, and he loves sports so much that we ended up speaking for an hour and a half. And just the gentleman that he is and how polite he is, at the end of this conversation, he mentioned, so do you mind if I look at investing in your company? And who says that, right?
Right.
Like, especially someone at his level. So I was very, it was one of those, moments where you feel like, okay, there was something good in, doing this, when I started. So I guess from that point of view, that was like a game changer for us. So obviously Mr. Mahindra coming in was a big sort of moment for us.
And I think things were really falling into place. And just then, like it happened for the entire globe, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And your entire business model is about being on ground and with people.
Yeah.
How was that? How was it dealing with that? And how was that right?
Yeah, I mean, in one word, it was very hard. Just very, very difficult and like challenging because obviously, like I said earlier, we have a team in place. You don't want to lose anyone, so we kept people going. We obviously had to adjust things like salaries, etc. So you have to do what you have to do to stay alive. But at the end of the day, I think like within a few months, I mean, I'm only human, so obviously the first thing is, oh my god, look at this is happening to me. You start feeling like the victim, but then I think you just turn around pretty quickly. Like if you have that ability where you tell yourself that it's not going to last forever and things will get better. And yeah, it was definitely a very difficult time, but we sort of had some online things going on where we got our community engaged with these quizzes online and games online and things like that. Nothing that actually made us any significant money, but at least we kept the community engaged. So that's how we survived as a company through the pandemic.
Wow. So there are all kinds of ups and downs. I've got so many questions for you, but Delna, let me come to you first. I've known you for a really long time. At that point, of course, you were transforming the way passenger cars were being launched, used, the image of Tata Motors, and I think it was incredible. And look where they are now. Also, it's just amazing stuff. I mean, I never experienced interiors and finishing and detail and attention to detail about all that. But from that, you've now got your own consulting practice. Tell us a little bit about it, because you're very quiet about it, but you're doing a lot of work. So run me through a little bit. I mean, I've got it here. So you had Tata Motors, and then from there, you decided to do your own thing.
Yep. I have a vision for my life, and actually that is what I keep training people to do as well, right? You should have some idea of an end state. Now, how do you get to that end state? Changes. There are various ways to get to that end state. So at every stage of my life, I used to think, what do I want to do? What is the contribution I want to make? Now, listen, at the end of the day, when you're a Parsi, and I am very, very proudly a Parsi, you grow up surrounded by stories of all these stalwarts who've done phenomenal things in life, right? So for me, when I was growing up, obviously, like every good Parsi kid, especially with a father at that time in telco and a mother in a bank, we used to have a lot of conversations around the corporate world and their struggles, and they'd be talking to each other and they talk about the Tata Group. So for me, it was a case of saying, look, I would like to make a contribution. These people did great things in life. I want to do great things in life. You're a simple family, simple value system. So the parents will say, okay, why don't you look at TAS? So I actually decided to join TAS when I was a young kid, simply because that's the exposure they gave me, right? So I said, okay, fine, I'll be part of lots of companies, I'll do great work, etc., etc., etc. Why I say etc. is because that was just the first end state, right? Saying I have to get into TAS and I have to do interesting things. Once I got in there and I was doing interesting things, a very different kind of voice was going on inside me, right? What is that contribution that people like Jamshedji Tata made at his time, or then JRD made at his time? There are various things that the country needs or the world needs. And there are definitions of philanthropy. In their time, they talked about setting up large, big businesses, industrial. There was nothing in India in that sense, right? The industrialization, the entire businesses, the enterprise thought started with them, and they kind of built it. Of course, there have been many others who built it, many of whom then have become my clients over the years.
Wow.
But the idea was that was the way life happened.
That was the need of
the time, and that's how it grew. As my time went by and I was picking up skills and I was learning and I was doing what I was doing in the corporate world and I was doing stretch assignments, a lot of it was very individual-led, right? So I come from this background. I need this skill. I need to learn sales. I need to learn business turnaround. I need to learn market entry. And that was all because I was planning to be a leader for the corporate world.
Correct.
However, that voice was always there saying, is that enough? Is that impact enough? And I think it grew louder and louder and louder as the years went by. So at one stage, I said, what do I want the next decade to be, right? And that would be the decades of the 40s. And then subsequently, which is the decade I'm in right now, what will I do when I'm in my 50s? I have a vision for it, right?
Okay.
So in my 30s, that voice became really loud. And I realized that philanthropy, as we've always known it, which is saying you build something out and then the next generation and then the next generation and the next generation, is not going to be something I'm interested in, because I don't have that kind of thinking, and that's not the kind of life I've led, right? And nor is it the life choices I've made. I'm a single woman. I do not have children of my own, and I never thought I wanted to have any of my own. So that legacy in the conventional sense was not a legacy I was interested in, right? And so then
and you knew that really early on.
Yeah, that was like as a
Fab.
kid.
Fab to know yourself and your priorities. That
priority was very early on. As a
Right.
teenager itself, I had made those decisions.
Okay,
The
so-
philosophy was very clearly saying, what do I have to give? Now, if most people get caught into the thing of building up big legacies of money and then bequeathing that money and then building up big industrial.
Absolutely.
So I asked myself, what is my real value? So my real value is my brain.
Right.
Right? Or the experience that I have. And which is why my legacy actually is just that. And I said, I don't have to wait till I am a certain age and dead to actually start doing what I have to do. Today, what I have at my disposal is an understanding of business, is an understanding of how to build sustainable, profitable businesses. And that is a need of the hour.
Right.
The reason I say it's a need of the hour is because especially at that period, like 14, 15, 16, and 16 mid when I finally left, lots of conversations about the startup ecosystem, lots of conversations about chasing your dreams. And a certain kind of narrative was very strong, right? And at that time, I realized that, yes, maybe that's one way of doing things. I am not judgmental at all about how you do it. But the large percentage of people, this is not how you build business. It has to be sustainable.
Yeah.
It has to be profitable and has to have impact. Now, you can have impact at scale. You can have impact in a smaller geography. You can have it in your local area. But do you actually build your business keeping in mind the principles of business and building a business model that can actually sustain itself? And that knowledge is not easy to come by.
Right.
Right? It's easy to come by if you search, but a lot of the conversation is around, raising money, big money,
All
fundraisers,
the time.
exits, ESOPs, jumping from one job to the other.
Yeah, it feels like a real version of, or the Instagram version or social media version of the truth.
Of what really
Yeah,
businesses
so
are.
it can be like, and it's...
And that's all you keep getting.
Right.
So that's how I kind of set out there. Now, I obviously couldn't do that with a corporate job, and I wasn't born super rich. So I had to kind of do both. So
Right.
I actually have my consulting practice when it started 8 years back. It was very clearly having the transformation work,
Right.
where we work with the large corporates, we work with listed companies or private companies which are mid-market or much larger than that as well. And we do their transformation, business transformation. But an entire set of work that I do is around the startup ecosystem, which is by and large not paid, right? And it's been over 500 startups that we've advised through the inflection points. And very often it's just a few hours, but you kind of leave somebody with a thought and then they kind of run with it. There are some who've stayed for much longer now, and for years they've been with me and my team. But that's what it was. So it started as an impact thing. Very long answer to your question.
Excellent answer.
But it's about how you look at business, how you think about business. Right?
So you look at a business and you actually try to restructure some aspects of it, change maybe even the thinking or the ideology of the company and stuff like that. Through that, there must be, in life also there are certain pillars that generations have to stand on. They are right and wrong. What are the most common things that you think people fall off the journey on? Or
see, I think most of the time, Cyrus, it's
the
a
blind
lot of
sides,
people,
basically.
right? So basically, what happens is there are principles of, law of gravity. You don't like it, it's not disappearing. It's still going to exist. So there are certain laws and principles of business as well, right? And then it gets interpreted in the way you actually execute. Very often, it's really about understanding at a principle level your business. So I've said it many, many times, and I'll keep saying it. When we go into some of these large companies, they have a bench of really smart people who know their business. I mean, we do things like petrochemicals, oleochemicals, industrials, building materials, automotive, of course, and huge different industries where I will never have the domain expertise.
Correct.
What we do have very clearly is an understanding of business, right? And whether it is the large business to the small business to a small little setup, the minute it's a business, principles will kick in.
Okay.
Scale, complexity will change. So we actually look at your business model. Is your business model scalable? Is your business model if it is scalable, is it profitably going to be happening, right?
Wow.
What is it going to cost you to do that? And then you kind of do a deep dive on your strategy, operations, and people, the 3 pillars, not by me, very well established pillars. But you actually go into depth to see on each of these. Everywhere the complexity will change.
And the degrees change. So something is not sustainable, not scalable, something maybe more scalable.
And it's at a business model level. So is this a business that's a growth business, a profitable business, or is it something that's going to be a scalable business? Scalable business means revenue goes up exponentially,
And you
costs start flattening. If your costs don't start flattening at some point in time, it's not a scalable business. You're just burning cash.
Okay, yeah, and then you lead people into that. And
Yeah.
you both work together.
Go ahead. So actually, last year we set up our consulting practice outside of India. So we finally have gone global in that sense, right? And I will kind of talk about what being global means because people use it very loosely. But what I did discover is that a lot of my large clients, actually, one of them said to me that why are we using some of these other name partners outside? Right?
Okay.
I mean, or name companies outside. Why have you not set up your practice and your way of building businesses or helping us in our businesses?
Right.
Please go out there and do it for us internationally as well, for our global operation. So it's just started as an idea. And I have known Yasmin for obviously my entire life, but also as a person, as a professional in the last few years, right? So as a professional, we started having these very interesting conversations as I was on my journey, and I kind of started picking her brains. We started discussing what to do. And I said, look, everyone's nudging me. I have lived and worked in multiple countries across the world. But my comfort is obviously always going to be a country that I first went and lived in by myself. It was England. And she's based in England.
Right.
And I said, what about we set it up here? And that's how the journey started.
So first of all, Yasmin, regulatory and compliance are your expertise. You've done so much work. You've been with banks, but when we were talking a little earlier, you went from India, you went to study abroad. You spent a year studying something, realized it's not what you think it'll be, and you didn't see yourself being passionate and obsessed about it. And then you came back, then you went back and studied something else. People get stuck, their lives, full
I mean,
stop.
I think that point itself, right, where you had the guts to do that at that
Exactly.
age. Right?
This is the 80s.
Yes.
Right.
I'm quite late. Quite late because it wasn't a decision that I made, like say for example, when I was 18 or 19, where I said, all right, this is something that I've dreamt about, never did, and let me change over. This was pretty late in the day. I was almost 24 at that point when I realized that I had, done my master's in a certain area, and that wasn't what I saw myself doing for the next 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And I might as well make the change now while I can, rather than spend that many years and be generally unhappy.
Yeah, but what percentage of people do that?
Yeah.
Such
not
a
at all.
small percentage of people, because the pain of shifting is more than actually moving.
It's always a
Nobody
challenge.
moves.
It's always a challenge. But I think
in the short term, you're right.
Yeah.
The pain
In
in
the
the
long
short
term, it's like torture.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
torture, you multiply it. But that short-term decision is a very difficult decision to take,
Horrible.
especially at that time, because you've invested all that time studying, right?
Your whole family,
it's
everybody on board.
It's what you went through when
Exactly.
you decided to shift. But that was much later.
But you have to listen to that voice, right? Like that voice will tell you.
Yeah, but as a
Not
young
everyone
person
does that,
who's
though.
studying, I'm sure
horrible.
the family pressure must have been crazy.
The family pressure was high.
Yeah.
Especially when it was my dad was a GP, and we were always we grew up with the whole thing about get into the medical field, etc., become the usual Parsi thing, become a doctor or an engineer. Those were the two careers that most of our the older generation could think about as worth
stable
doing.
ones.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
stable ones.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I informed my parents that I didn't want to do that. I had already spent X number of years doing my master's in that field, but I've suddenly decided, not suddenly, that I don't see myself doing that anymore, and I want to go into. At that time, it was the early days of technology, IT, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I went off and did my postgrad in computer sciences.
It's very
Wow.
perceptive though at
Change.
that
Yeah,
stage to
my-
get onto computer sciences,
Absolutely. It's incredible. And I'm so happy you got the support. So I think you're talking about 3 defiant ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
know,
the idea,
that's the
right?
thing,
A lot
that's
of
the
the
plan.
times, one of the things that I like people to understand is that it's at any stage of your life, you can make that change, right? And you just have to follow that dream. You've got to be realistic about it. I think we all went through really tough journeys, but we've landed okay, right?
That's the lovely part, that you're
Yeah.
talking about the tough journeys. It's not like, oh, it was easy and there were really doubtful days, because there's your gut, and then there's logic, and
Yeah.
then there's
Challenges.
challenges which
This
come up
common
every
sense.
day.
Yeah.
And now you made that decision, so you don't get to blame anybody for it.
Oh, absolutely.
It ends with you. But coming back to regulatory and compliance,
How did you really land up there?
yeah,
It was just something that evolved, because after I did my after I moved into the IT world, and I got seconded to work for an organization in the UK, and that's how I moved from India to UK. This was going back 35 years ago, and of course enjoyed what I was doing. Worked with multiple financial institutions, multiple banks, developed large systems, integrated systems, did a fair amount of program management, etc. Integrating, as we were talking about, integrating systems across, in some cases where 2 banks actually merged and we integrated their
wow.
early system. And this is early days, I mean, before most people know of PCs and
Yeah.
mobiles, etc. We worked with mainframes.
Right.
Did all of that. And then,
Yeah.
of course, realized that one of the biggest challenges for large organizations and most organizations in the UK was the regulatory landscape. Because there was a huge number of regulations that were put in place, not just by regulatory bodies, but also by the government. And it wasn't just the UK government, because banks work in multiple jurisdictions. And so it was regulations that were put in place by those jurisdictions. So you can, if you've got like Barclays Bank, for example, which was in Europe, the US, India, Singapore, regs were from all of those jurisdictions.
Right.
So the banks needed to ensure that they were compliant.
Correct.
Globally compliant.
Globally
Globally
compliant.
compliant,
Exactly.
not just globally compliant
also
to
locally.
jurisdictional
Yeah.
ones, but also to industry ones.
Correct.
So you had regulatory bodies which were specific to the finance industry.
Right.
In the UK, the FCA, the PRA, HMRC, all of these were putting in place fairly complex laws and regulations around the what banks needed to do. And the biggest challenge for the banks were that they had different lines of business. They had technology, they had business processes, operations. All of these were led in silos. So often enough, what was happening was that they would look at a regulation, they would make the handful of changes, but each area wasn't actually talking to the other.
Right.
So you had disjointed changes that were being put in place, some of which were not actually stacking up. Some of them were not working. And so when I first got involved, this was, most of all, you all must have heard of the FATCA regulation. All
Yes,
of us have
I've
heard
heard
of
of
it. Anyone who has any dealing with any bank as a client
Yeah.
knows. So this was early. This was in 2013-14 when FATCA had just been put in place by the US government, and all banks needed to ensure compliance to that. The changes that Barclays made eventually worked, but they were quite disjointed when it was being developed, and that's what I recognized. So I put together a model that would work for the bank, which delivered end-to-end regulatory changes. So not just the technology part, but changes that were needed to the business, to operations,
Personnel, everything.
training,
Yeah.
customer training, customer awareness, colleague training, as well as even legal documents. So terms and conditions that needed to be changed.
Right.
all of that, putting all of that together and looking and dealing with all the lines of business. So not just the retail bank, but the corporate bank, the investment bank, putting all of that together. So that model that I put in, we eventually set up the regulatory change hub. And then subsequently, over the next 8-9 years, we delivered some major complex changes for multiple regulations.
So, because it's been only getting
And
worse and worse and tougher and tougher,
is.
right? I mean,
It is. But it's also having put in a model like that helped because, say, like, just giving one example, another fairly large regulation that was enacted, I think it came into force in 2018-19, which was GDPR, the Global Data Protection Regulation.
It's crazy.
It started off as a European change. It was then the UK also had to enact their own privacy law. And so the changes that we made took us almost 1.5 years to put in all of the changes.
Which is actually speedy, given the...
we didn't have a choice.
Because
when a regulation is going to be, when a reg is going to be enforced by a certain date, you have to be ready. You have to be ready. But having delivered that, 2 years later, the governor of California in the US decided to introduce that. California introduced its own regulation, which was around privacy.
Right.
So the knowledge that we had learned in delivering GDPR could be put into place when we delivered. It was there.
Wow.
So
it's interesting because nobody thinks about this side of business usually, right? Like
till you see the news where somebody's got hit with a fine.
Correct.
Exactly. That's right.
That's what I was coming to.
In fact, everyone, it's the one you want to evade.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about it, you want to invest in it, and then suddenly you hear one of the big companies got slapped by a fine.
And then boom, it changes everything.
Yeah.
But we're talking a lot about big companies which have that mammoth infrastructure to even afford these changes. What are the few things that smaller companies should keep in mind while navigating global regulations that may not have access to so much?
Yeah. So it obviously depends on the commitment that the company has towards meeting regulatory change. So what we're talking about are small and medium-sized organizations, which most of them do not have the maybe the financial wherewithal to have in-house teams, who are constantly monitoring new regulations, who are also monitoring what controls the organization has already put into place, what are the gaps, what is that they need to deliver need to put in place before the new regulation hits, or even an existing regulation, are they fully compliant? They may not even know about it. So what works often enough is when they involve consultancy, and that's what we have been talking about, because that is a gap. I have seen smaller organizations who are quite lost because they don't know what the regulation actually entails. They don't know the details. They don't know what the rules are. What are the standards that they need to meet? And inadvertently, they're non-compliant. It's not that they intend to be non-compliant, but because they're not even aware of.
They're not aware of some of these.
They're not aware of it.
And then you have a lot of other guidance that is incorrect.
Yeah.
It's not
a lot of it
It's
is
very complex.
And
the guidance is very complex. And because
it's a bounce. I mean, like you guys, when we started this conversation, you said, right, my God, regulatory and compliance, what are we talking about?
Right, of course.
It is made unnecessarily difficult. And that's one of the things we're always trying to do, right? Smaller companies, younger companies, you don't need to have the same complex systems and knowledge in-house. You can't afford it.
You can't afford it.
What you don't know, you don't know, right?
Right.
So how do you kind of make it accessible and easy to understand?
Yeah, and it's a format that
you can't dumb it down.
But you
can't dumb it down because you will make a mess of it. But can you make it easy enough?
One of the things that which you raised was, do you have something like a checklist?
Exactly.
Is that something? Yes, you can use that for almost like a guideline, but it's not the be all and end all, because you've got a fairly broad based regulation which covers multiple industries. So, and each industry would have one element of that regulation that they need to comply to. So, unless and until you have a 500-page checklist,
Exactly. It's intricate.
and then individuals wouldn't know, which
It's
elements
overwhelming.
are relevant.
It's
Yeah,
so-
It's
absolutely.
overwhelming, and it's
And
built.
it is.
It's built to also confuse.
To mess you up. Yeah.
I think it's not that
Yeah,
easy.
but you're right.
It's built to
very,
confuse.
very honest. Like it's like it's something I myself don't understand or do beyond the point,
Yeah.
right? Because at the end of the day, it needs that depth of knowledge.
Depth of knowledge, legal language, interpretation of
But
information.
very often people just avoid it, and then you land in trouble.
That's the petrifying part. What's the best solution you could offer then to a small company that wants to comply, that doesn't want to deal with this? Because once the fines start and all the problems start, you're going into legal, you're going into major losses. What's the best way forward before the trouble happens?
If an organization does not have the in-house team
Right.
or resources who can actually take a look at it,
Yeah, let's take it as we don't.
if we take
Yeah.
it,
Right.
then I think the best approach for them is to reach out to specialists, to consultancy firms who can actually take a look at that business itself
Right.
and look at the regulations that are relevant to that business. All regulations wouldn't be relevant. Or if they are dealing with two specific, let's just say if they are into specific jurisdictions,
Right.
then it's regulations which are specific to those jurisdictions, which are specific to their line of business, and also be able to identify what are the changes they need to make,
Correct.
but being fairly proportionate about it.
Right.
Because you cannot make just about every change
It's
in
impossible.
place. You
Yeah.
cannot.
Yeah.
It's just not cost effective.
Right.
So what is it that you can put in place to ensure you are compliant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Safety net. Like
Safety
a
net.
checklist
Absolutely.
safety net.
Safety net.
Which is used like preventive medicine. In many ways.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
And I think the best approach towards them, and that's something that we have been thinking about, is that there are a large number of organizations that, because they're not comfortable, they don't know who to reach out to, who will be able to assist them in this, they just don't deal with it.
Yeah, can,
Yeah,
I, ask,
it's
can,
like-
can
yeah.
I ask you guys one question?
Yeah.
It's like, for me, because I know so little about this, it's like, you've got a scratch or an itch or a problem and you keep evading it, evading it. I once went to just moving away from the topic, I went to a person who runs an Ayurvedic center. And I said, hey man, I just want to keep healthy and make better choices in my life because I'm a mess. I travel a lot. I eat wrong. And he said, I don't have time for you. You go to a normal guy. I only deal with chronic disease problems. And I'm like, why is that? He says, because you people will be like, I want to have a black coffee also. But I'll eat healthy veg salads and all. He said, it doesn't work like that. I want 100% compliance of an understanding of stuff. Most people get into trouble and come looking for the solution, right?
Yeah.
How much of that comes to you? Because it can backfire badly. And how much of it can be solved by quickly getting in and making sure that you don't end up in this situation? Because I'm sure you get a lot of people who are already a mess now and they've got fines and now they ask you to clean up.
Like emergency situations.
Emergency situations. What is the percentage? Just curious.
Do you want to answer this one? This is something.
So this is why did we actually set up this practice? So I'm the one who actually saw that happen, right? And that's when we were discussing about it, and I said, Yasmin, can we do something about this?
Right.
It's not an area I understand.
Right.
And I'm very honest about what I can help and what I can't help with, right? And what I could see is that, and this is really one of the key reasons why we actually set this up. Today, India is the market everyone is looking at.
Globally.
Right? Globally. It's just a reality. It started almost 10 years back that we started even redoing some of our FTAs, but it's really accelerated. And there's very high interest in coming into India. So you have countries who are wanting to, companies from other countries coming into India.
Right.
People who've already come into India.
Absolutely.
Now that's one set that I'm already seeing. right? Now there are a set of companies going from India out, and that's where the conversation started,
Wow.
right?
So completely different laws
so
and
for
rules.
me, it's like you are thinking about, and that's why I said you use the word global very loosely, but it's not really global. It's how are you going global also happens in various ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could be as simple as going international, which was the way most of us did in the corporate world, where you just set up an office and you are exporting, right?
Right, but that's not...
That's also because now you're exporting, so there is an entire thought process around it, regulation around it, right? But going out of India and setting up is something that's very exciting for Indian companies. It's very exciting for, earlier used to be only the large companies who would do it. Now what I have been nudging a lot of people to do is go yourself. You can. Don't be scared.
Wow.
Right? Just go out there. The world is your canvas. It's a lot more connected. So just like we all, and that's one of the reasons why it was important to just get some of these backstories, because each of us have to battle that first block in your own head, right? And going outside India and setting up outside India is something that you want to do, but you hold yourself back.
Again, leaving a safety net and
your safety
a whole
net,
new set of
right?
regulations and rules.
And this is what happens. So now today, a lot of young companies who are looking at doing that, or companies who've been around for a while but are looking at doing that, don't necessarily understand how to from the compliance and regulation point of view. And that sometimes holds you back.
Correct.
Remember, the kind of organizations that I've worked with are really, really large. They have the in-house capability. They have the monies to hire the best of the best in the world, and the best of the best in the world are there.
Yeah.
Right. And as Yasmin in her experience has also worked with some of those firms who've done it, right? But you can't afford it.
Yeah.
So are you going to hold back your dream because you can't afford it? And that's how we literally set up and launched.
There's nothing much for that.
There isn't.
Where you get the expertise, but you don't go bankrupt doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because when you look at those costs, you turn around and say, not going to do it, not worth it. So either you don't do it.
Right.
Or,
So we've discussed, and we understand that, okay, mega companies can come with infrastructure, hire the best of the best, deal with these losses. I'm a small company. I didn't check compliance. I didn't have the bandwidth for that. We were too busy scaling. What's the most important thing for someone to do like now that they can check when it comes to compliance, and so they don't end up with a terrible fine or some other problems later?
To keep it as simple as possible and to make it cost effective, I think what would be useful is for those organizations to reach out to businesses that can actually come in and do a regulatory compliance health check. Similar to, when you have internal audits, for example,
Right.
looking at certain areas.
Right.
So this would be what you would call as an internal audit, or,
Right.
it's a health check.
Right.
What are the regulations that are relevant to the business? What are the regulations that are relevant to the jurisdiction that that business is doing business in? What are the, what do they currently have in place?
Right.
Because they may have something in place. And what are the gaps? Identify the gaps. And a step further would be for whoever comes in, whichever consultancy firm comes in, would be to assess what are the changes that they should make to ensure that they are compliant in principle.
Right. So for that, we could come to a company like you, because again, my understanding is if you go to a mega company, again, you're a part of this assembly line and you may not get that attention to detail that is very specific to my organization.
And also cost. Because, so
Massive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Bill by the
one
hour.
of the things that you've got to understand is that, because we do this a lot, and I do work with the large corporates, right? And I say that, look, my entire team, whichever team comes in to do the work, we're all experienced individuals. So at an individual level, you will land up paying a pretty hefty fee. There's no denying it, right? It is high. But we don't come with the fixed costs of the large firms. And we don't come with all the N number of young people who are there, who are getting trained on your dime, right? So that makes the big difference. So we actually are able to give you solutions which are more customized to you and your challenge, simply because well, you're only paying for that brain.
Exactly.
And you're paying a lot for the brain,
Yeah.
but you're paying for a clear
Specific-
understanding of what it is, solving your problem and move on.
Right.
Also, our entire model has always been from a point of view of not creating dependencies.
Right.
Love the freedom.
Love it.
We love our freedom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're not interested
Yeah.
in creating a dependency.
You're not creating customers. You're like, dude,
Yes.
this is it, and now go.
Solve and move, because guess
Lovely.
what? The idea is to have maximum impact for the maximum number of businesses.
Right.
So we're going to solve it for you in terms of telling you what you need to do. DIY, go do it yourself. You want us to do it, you can afford it, we'll help you, partner. But at some point, we're cutting that umbilical cord.
Because
Very
we don't want
agile
to.
business model.
Love it.
We're a very agile business model.
love
And the idea is impact, right? The idea is not what conventionally businesses look.
So it's fascinating. India's at such an interesting place.
Yeah.
There are companies who are dying to come into India. There are companies already in India. And then there's a lot of Indian culture and companies
Yeah.
going out of India and taking their story.
Yeah.
For example, yours, you've
Yeah.
now also got a place in Dubai, which you've
That's
opened
right.
up, right?
That's right.
How was it moving from India there? What was the compliance issues you may have faced?
Sure.
And,
I mean, look, there's no doubt, Cyrus, that in India, the sports market is booming. So, technically, there was no reason. I mean, we could stay in India forever and we do pretty well. I mean, we're not just talking about Mumbai, but there's so many other markets out there. So much potential with our model for getting people back to sports, having academies, doing something with sports technology. So it's all there in India. But I think what happened with us is during the lockdown, I started realizing that we're so India focused. We put all our eggs in the India basket, which is not a bad thing, but sometimes it's not good to be dependent on one market. So we decided, let's venture out there. Now, the next sort of like an extension of India is really the UAE.
Correct.
It's like I like to think of
Absolutely.
Dubai as Delhi on drugs sometimes, because when you go there, it's literally like on overdrive. It's
He
like,
said it, Anand.
no, I mean
Delhi on more drugs.
more drugs. Yeah. No, so nothing against Delhi, nothing against
Yeah,
Dubai.
yeah.
I mean, I love the place, but it's just so much happening in Dubai in terms of the Indian population is there, and obviously an extension of cricket and sports and things like that. So Dubai made sense. So around 2021, I started doing that investigation of going there. In the middle of COVID, I was trying to catch flights in between and make sure that I wasn't getting into trouble for that in any way. But so we did that, and in 2022, when things got a little better, we actually opened our subsidiary there. And one of the things that we didn't know about there was any of these rules and regulations, because obviously Dubai was very open to business during the lockdown. They wanted to attract businesses from across the world, but then things started getting tighter as more recently with the whole Russia-Ukraine war. There's a lot of money coming in through Dubai, so obviously banks have become a lot stricter with regulations, and you need to be on top of things. So one of the things we did actually there, and I think that was a good idea when I think about it, is we got a local partner. Now, there's no reason in the UAE for Indian companies to have local partners.
It's not mandatory?
It's not mandatory anymore. You can have a 100% subsidiary. You can have your own thing. But the reason we decided to do that is because of things like regulations and understanding the local culture a little better. So we tied up with a gentleman named Mr. Varis Syed, who's originally from India anyway, so he understands both cultures. And so Varis runs this amazing finance company called Fincasa Global. And so with Varis's help, he ensures that we are meeting all our rules, our regulations, etc. So we've done a lot of that, and that way we've stayed compliant.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something so interesting. It's also, so that he covers your checklist basically primarily, and that's why he chose him. But there's also culture.
Yeah.
The way people approach sport, the relationship people have with their families, the timings, everything.
Yeah.
Everything changes when you come to another place. Culturally also, I find that must be a massive, sometimes shocker, or it's very difficult to adapt for foreign companies coming into India, where they are massive, they've got streamlined processes that they think will work, and then they hit a brick wall, and they're like, wow. I mean, look at anything. Look at food. India is predominantly vegetarian. You had companies like McDonald's that had to have Burger King was like a completely different model. There was no beef. So I'm thinking there's so much in any department you go to. How do people manage that? Where do you come into that and help understand? Let's take India, for example, because you drive for 4 hours and it's another food, another way of dressing, another thought pattern, another language. It's like 40 countries in one country.
Yeah.
Yet you have to work for all of them. Where does your expertise come in for that, and how is it?
I'm very amused because you said drive 4 hours. I think you were talking about just the Bombay traffic, right? So, Cyrus, it's very interesting because it's something that I don't think I actually actively did it, but it just so happened that in my first entire assignment that I did as a young lady itself, I insisted on being in sales. And as a result of that, I landed up traveling across India.
Right.
And I spent months and months, not like days, months on ground in UP, in Haryana, in Gujarat, in south of India, various states, and of course Maharashtra. And I worked abroad as well. So what happened is that you kind of start then building up an understanding of people, and you realize that language is only one part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's an interesting model, and I actually give it. So first I'll speak from an individual level, how do you do it? And then how do you do it at an organizational or a leadership level, right?
Okay.
So if you look at it even as an individual, we all grew up saying your thoughts, your words, and your actions should be aligned.
Correct.
What is the thing that you always pick up? You will generally never know what an originating thought is, but you can always pick up a person's words and actions. And if there is some kind of dissonance, you realize something is off.
Okay.
And you figure out what is it this person is actually trying to say. Now, if you care enough to do that, then you will be understood as you intended, or you'll get the result as you intended.
True. If
Right?
there's a compassionate inquiry on the other side.
On both sides.
On both sides.
But even if it's not on the other side, if you are mindful of it, it gets easier. Right? Because then that's when we will find this cultural thing that you're saying is a cultural nuance. So after working across India and in a very complicated environment, because in India also it's like I speak Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati and English. And yet there are big parts of India that I cannot survive on the language, right? That I do know. And as a result of that, you start picking up a lot of non-verbal cues. You start looking at a lot of behavioral traits. Now my life gets very complicated when I actually went to Europe, because suddenly now you've gone to Europe,
Right.
and you're based in England, you're living in a foreign country, you're working across West Europe. And West Europe is again a melting pot of various cultures. So now not only is it the language, but understanding that there is a framework in which people work.
Okay.
Right? People don't work in isolation. So, I mean, you might not as a business person be too involved with somebody's personal life and personal choices, and you shouldn't go down there beyond the point. But at business itself, why are they reacting a certain way? Why are they saying something and acting in a certain way? And you could fall into the trap of falling into the frame of reference from India. Because in India, this happens like this, and so this person is behaving like this.
You go back to your references.
You go to your references.
And that's what's happening for them also.
And that's what's happening for them also. So now what happens is you go into Europe. After that, I go into ASEAN and I set up in ASEAN. So you've got the 10 countries of ASEAN, but you've also got all the East Asia countries, whether it's Japan, Korea, all of them doing business out there. And now we've already taken over a company from Korea. So it's already now it's been 20 plus years of working with them. But you kind of realize that complexity is very different. And that is where a lot of businesses fail. So taking it from an individual level to a business level, you tend to fall into the trap of fitting into your frame of reference, whether as an organization or as an individual. When you work with people, whether people coming into India, within Indians, we going outside, that doesn't matter. Which action, which direction is going, it doesn't matter. The principle holds. The principle of understanding that very often we rely on your words and actions being aligned, but very often the reason they might not be aligning itself is because what they're trying to say you haven't even understood.
This is a relationship advice situation also.
There he
Yeah.
jumped in that, right?
Isn't it?
It's
Yeah,
true.
it would
It's
be.
true.
And then we have preconceived notions. Nobody
Absolutely. Nobody
Yeah.
really does
is
it,
meeting
right?
anybody. We're all
Yeah.
50% pre-decided. Then you have to
Absolutely.
disprove that.
And as you get older and older and older, you get much more set in your ways or
Rigid.
much more
Yeah.
Yeah.
prejudicial in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
responses. Now, that again applies to large companies, right? So the
Wow.
larger, the stronger the company you are in your home market, your tendency to believe my way or the highway is very high.
A while ago, I read this book
Hmm.
years ago. Very nice title: "Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands."
Hmm.
And it's really apt because it just tells you as is, and there's
Yeah.
little things that you can do that can mess
Absolutely.
up huge business relationships.
Absolutely mess up
Wow.
huge
Yeah.
business relationships, right?
And relationships.
Taking away from what
Yeah.
you said about the smile bow bit,
Huh.
I was attending a meeting, and you know what it is when you meet somebody new. Tendency in the West is to shake hands.
Right.
So I reached out to shake hands to this person, and he didn't. He actually put his hand on his chest and he says, "I don't shake hands with ladies."
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And for me, this was the first time. I am of Indian background, but for me, it came as quite a shock.
Yeah.
There you go.
Especially because it would have happened in a so-called
It
Western
was.
environment.
It was in the
Absolutely.
UK. It was in the bank, and
Boom, there you go. Well, tell me what some hands-on examples of stuff when you were in Italy, you were in Thailand. Again,
Yeah, I mean,
mega different
Big
cultures.
culture
Thailand is
difference.
like that.
yeah, I mean, so Thailand was very interesting because what we did, and it's, I mean, I'd gone from India to UK. UK is a little more understandable because I've traveled, I've already done enough, I have fair knowledge about Europe. But when my entire set of people we were planning to set up in Thailand, and it was the first time we were going to set up in Thailand, right? We actually bought books. We actually made it mandatory reading for the entire team that was going there. We got ourselves a coach. He actually trained all of us on what is right, wrong, what are the cultural nuances. And then we had a training down to that, how do you interpret the smile? Because non-verbal cues are very important, right? See, a lot of times,
What do you mean by interpret the
Emotion.
smile? Then I have to finish.
no, because see, it's true because a lot of these cultures do not exhibit emotion,
Correct.
right? To the level that in other cultures we exhibit emotions.
Yeah.
I'm not talking, I mean, it's interesting because you're all in Asia, but I'm saying a lot of Western cultures, you will just say it, right? You
Oh,
will
yeah.
say if
And
there's
it's
a
very rude.
problem sometimes.
Yeah.
Because why do you find it rude? Because culturally we are not used to having
Yeah,
people being
Going
very
round and round.
forthright into
Yeah.
your face. Now, these are cultures where even if you share that and you expect a direct feedback, chances are you'll probably not get a direct feedback. You've got to pick up the cue. If you make an unreasonable request culturally, the chances of them saying no to you, if you are from the headquarters or you are from a different culture, they will not know how to say no, but their face will say it.
Yeah.
And
You
if
gotta
you're
read
smart
that.
enough,
Yeah.
if you're smart enough, you will say, got it. Right.
Wow.
And that is one of the things. I mean, there are a lot of other cultures
Like
where,
a-
and
like a
I
relationship.
won't even name it because that doesn't help. But there are certain cultures where at work, it'll be a very a structured conversation about business. And it might even go down to negotiating hard on the few euros. So you have it, it's in Europe. And then they'll step out and spend 10 times that value on the lunch. And you're wondering,
Yes.
why did we spend 2
Man.
hours talking
Yeah.
about those few euros? But that was about the business. That was about that negotiation.
It's
it was not
so
you.
bizarre to get your head
Right.
around this.
But there are other cultures, and in Asia, where the business, and sometimes they get frustrated. Say, we finished a 4-hour meeting. What did we achieve? And I've had situations where I've had certain country, I mean the West normally, they've come out of the meeting thinking that went very well. It's all wrapped up.
Yeah.
They've gone back, deals done, not gone through at all.
Wow.
At all.
Someone needs to write a book on this.
There are
man.
many books written on it. There are many
Yeah.
conversations. The challenge is that people don't prepare. And even if to date, when I am interacting with any new culture, I tend to spend time understanding about it.
Yeah, you should.
And with people from that. So it's very often with the native, right? Because there is a perception of people who have worked internationally, and then there is a perception of a person who is native.
Listen, this happens all the time. I went for a phone launch. It was a Japanese phone launch. There were 22 people on the table, and then the head boss or someone came in, and I didn't know that depending on supremacy, you bow. So if I bow this much, then the one below me bows a little more, and then the one below me, the last guy is like put his head in his knee by the time he's bowing. And then the conversation starts. So I don't know where I was in that equation.
Yeah.
How much do I bow, man? I was like, oh, I don't know. I was just like, I did the left-right bow, because I'm like, hey, and
Indian bow.
They were just like, this guy's so weird.
But the beauty of this entire thing is, when they realize that you're conscious, most people are just happy about that.
So
I think
true.
the challenge
So true.
is that we don't put in the effort to understand. We want to be understood very easily, but we don't want to put the effort to understand at all.
Yeah, like in France, like even if you don't speak fluent French, but if you make the effort, they'll actually
Warm up.
respond, you
Yeah.
know. But if you're in English, they'll just say, take
They're
a
horrible.
hike, they're horrible.
They're horrible, man.
Yeah,
They won't give you direction.
yeah. Or in Egypt.
Yeah, but you toss in a s'il vous plaît and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. So you make that effort.
Yeah, maybe I should have said that. But listen, the same thing exists in a workplace.
Yeah.
In a normal office of say 300 people, it's super multicultural. People are from across the world. So how do you, because you've lived, studied, worked, set up stuff, how do you drive diversity and inclusion in a multicultural work setup, which is every work setup pretty much nowadays?
I heard this from someone. It's not my line, and I don't know where she got it from, but she
I-
told me
I
this
said it.
sometime back. She.
I have many pseudonyms.
And she's happy to go as she,
Yeah.
not they.
Yes.
So she said to me that, diversity is a reality. Diversity exists. Inclusion is a choice. And
Yeah.
I love the way she said it.
I said,
because-
and I added a comma which you didn't mention. I added a comma after this.
But it is true,
It's
isn't
super.
it?
It's super.
It's true that
Yeah.
whether you decide to include people or not is something that is a choice. And organizations can... So today, diversity has become something that you can't avoid anywhere, right? It is a reality of the kind of people that are coming in in terms of what is coming out of, at least in India, the kind of people graduating, the kind of people who are joining the workforce. It's a reality of talent. If the talent is half decent, you take it, because there is a huge talent shortage in our country. Let's be honest, right? So diversity automatically happens at an entry level if they come from the right, the right background of education, etc. Once they are in, are you inclusive or not, is a choice that organizations have to make.
But now they have to make them, no? But in
Yeah.
that also, how
They don't
paranoid
always
do you
make
have to
it.
get?
You don't have to get paranoid.
Like
right?
somehow,
So,
can't speak like this, can't look like
it's
this.
like, that's the thing.
That's
A lot of
horrible.
what we are
Balance
talking
your
about
fight.
today, tomorrow could well get cancelled, right? A few years from now.
Exactly.
And that is just the reality of evolution of society. Don't get obsessed by it. Understand it. Care to understand. Be comfortable with the fact that you might not be comfortable with what this person is saying, but they have a right to say it and exist. And you have a right to decide whether they need to be in your space or not at an individual level. In organizations, you have a culture, right? And that culture has to be built, managed.
Yes.
Has to
correct.
be managed and has to keep evolving. It's a living entity. So the people coming in, you keep building it, you keep evolving it, you keep growing it. And the ones who choose not to do it, die. Because life is brutal.
It
Yeah.
is.
I think as leaders, you have to, whether it's a small or large team, like you have to have that ability to treat people fairly, right? In every aspect. So whether it's religious, whether it's just a cultural thing,
Or politics
gender,
happens.
There just
gender.
has to be
politics.
Yeah.
there has to be a commitment
Yes.
at leadership level.
Yeah.
Wow.
It has to trickle down
and
from
pro-
It has to come from the top down.
has to, and sometimes even set slightly unrealistic goals and objectives, because those are not going to be achieved. But if you set those slightly unrealistic ones,
At least you get
then you
halfway
will
there.
get halfway
Yeah.
to it. And it will have to start at starting level. So at graduate level, that is the point when when we talk about inclusion, we are looking at the male-female proportion. You're often enough looking at a mix of different cultures, especially in the West,
Yep.
because there are some industries.
Now it's
There are some
can't keep up.
industries that are
Yeah.
very, very heavy white male
Yeah.
at senior level, at very, very senior level. And the only way that situation will change is if they start bringing in at entry level a fairly good
Right.
proportion.
And then also know where to stop.
Yeah.
And
Like
you
if
have to
I
keep nurturing.
identify-
No,
It
but you
has
have to
to be
keep
nurtured.
nurturing
You
through
got
the
to keep
funnel.
upgrading.
It
No, you have
has
to nurture it through the
that.
funnel.
You
Okay.
nurture the talent.
I mean, it's been 2017 is when I started working with a very large corporate in this space, right?
Yeah.
And I have seen their journey of continuously nurturing the talent right from entry
Yeah.
to the top.
Yeah.
Because entry, you hit parity quite quickly because, everyone's getting into that education and passing out, and it's easy to get that done.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier
Yes.
than it was
That is
when
correct.
we were growing up,
That is
right?
correct.
When I go back and I think in my times it was very difficult to find
Oh.
women doing what I was doing. But today you have them at the entry level easier. But if you don't nurture them through the funnel, the dropout rate is very high.
That no one talks about.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about headlines. And I've seen how effective it is. I work with a lot of corporates. The ones where it's all been streamlined to a base level of understanding, respect. And it is possible. Even respecting food choices, like the
Yeah.
veg is
Oh,
kept
yeah,
separate
yeah.
from the non-veg. The plates and forks. It's a
Yeah.
big deal in India, dude. It's not a joke.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's like,
Yeah,
I
a
don't
lot
want
of
to eat
companies
your
coming in should
non-veg
know that.
plate.
Yeah.
For a vegetarian, that's a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so effective because everybody feels included without being invited.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
it's like, wow, I'm already in the
Don't
party.
make it such a big
Don't make it
deal.
obvious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can't
Don't make it
filter
obvious.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you said
Yeah.
invited because
Yeah.
it has to be
Yeah.
as natural as breathing.
Exactly.
Are you that kind
Yeah.
of person?
Now,
Right?
how do you build a global brand which resonates with the local market and is relevant? I understand it's constantly evolving, but what would be your go-to things that you have to do?
See, whether global or local or whatever brand, first you have to follow the brand principles, right?
Right.
And that is extremely first, know who you are, why are you doing it, be authentic. I
Okay.
keep talking about it. Brands fail because they're not authentic. What is your reason to be, right? Why will you succeed? Be clear about that. Now, when you are a global brand in another market, so if I'm a brand who's going into another country, right? You have to now match your relevance to there. First of all,
Right.
because your winning location is now different.
Correct.
What is it that you've got as your core strengths or what you stand for or at a very simplistic level, when we talk about brands, we talk about brand identity, brand color, brand guideline. That all is okay. Brand value system, all of that okay. That after that, it starts getting more and more complicated.
Okay.
First of all, is your brand understood as you intended?
Correct.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, these are questions. You've got a company. This will be interesting chats to
Yeah.
have.
So
between
is
you.
it understood as you intended?
Okay.
Is it relevant?
Okay.
So are you going to succeed? Do you even have space? Who is the incumbent that is already meeting the need? So there are already incumbent brands who are meeting your need in the local market. You've come out there and saying, I'm this global brand and I'm like, I'm the cats, whatever. So
Shucks.
it doesn't work.
I'm reviewing my career and getting more and more depressed. By the end of this relevant part, I'm like, okay, Mama, I don't know if I'm relevant. Okay, next.
No, so you understand what is your reason? Why will you win?
Right.
Right?
Correct.
Do you have, first of all, is there a need out there? Are you relevant? What do you bring to the table? What you say you stand for doesn't even resonate. Because
Right.
you might be saying, I'm this and that, but it doesn't resonate with the people out there.
Correct. They don't see it.
So when you look at building your brand presence in another location, first you have to be clear about who you are, right? It can well happen that you decide that as I am, that market is not for me.
Okay. example? Give me an example of something that worked
Any
as a-
example, right? You could turn around and say that this is what my brand value system
And
is.
this market is not
This
for
is
us.
how I will win. This is what I believe I can. And this market doesn't have a requirement. They have very strong homegrown brands. And for me to fit in and to culturally change who I am, I don't want to do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's
Right.
too
That's
Like why
how-
noodles don't work in some place because
But
they have a...
you know what
Yeah.
people don't understand when we say about go global? It's not about just going out there and say, okay, I want to get into India because now India is growing. You have to have bigger reasons than just saying, oh, India is a large market, so I want to go there.
Okay.
So for me, the fact that a lot of people are looking at India just because it's a large market without understanding what is it that you're really bringing to the table? Why do you want to enter India? Do you have the understanding of what it takes to win in India? And if you don't have it, then please get that, right? Invest the time, effort, energy, because winning in India is not as saying is this little cookie cutter approach that I followed in my home country or in other international markets. I will just cut paste into India. It won't work. It's a lot more complicated as a market. Some of us who have spent our life here, it's an amazing market. It's a great market. I love my country, which is why I do what I do, right? So you've got to actually connect with the country. You have to connect with what you're bringing into this country. And why should you win and why do we need you?
Yes.
Right? Very often there are people who just think, I have a damn good product. This is a big market and I'm just going to win. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got to kind of build up that what we call as a go-to-market strategy. There are many elements to that you have to look at. And you have to find where are those pockets that you can win, really add value. You really want to add value. When you really want to add value, that's when you get those business results. So I think that's one of the big things, even as a brand. If you wish to succeed, be very clear about what it is that you're doing and why are you doing it.
Right.
And try to understand, not always just, my way or the highway.
Yeah, and it's when you understand that maybe as a brand, that's when you may realize that maybe this is not the market for me either, because it changes too much of my core brand value. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a sports tech company that recently reached out to us, and they want to come to India. They've achieved fairly good success in the US, so they want to adapt that model to the Indian market, but it won't work the way it is.
Right.
For certain reasons, which I won't be able to get into. But
Right, sure.
But basically,
And if you're not open-minded to take that feedback, then you want to come in, then burn, crash, burn.
then that's actually what has happened, right? Like those are the examples that we read about where these big companies come here.
And you're thinking, how did that happen? I
Exactly.
don't get it. Did you guys not know?
Yeah.
And and you've just a few $1 million down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
On a humorous level, you also keep hearing so many, say, car companies who launch the name of a car which is inappropriate in
Yes.
one country.
Yes.
And I'm like, guys, like
Yeah.
the
That's basic,
Pinto,
right?
remember,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
in Mexico.
yeah.
I'm like, guys,
Hell.
that also you didn't check.
I mean, like big companies like Coca-Cola have made that mistake in certain countries with certain drinks that they've
Exactly.
launched. So it happens, I guess.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, but many of these, those are the big ones that we hear about,
Of
right?
course.
But and those
And micro
mistakes,
levels and
it happens at micro level. Yeah.
at
Yeah.
a massive level. Now, Yasmin, you've done something incredible. You've got massive organizations and you have, so let's go on these big organizations where everything is super multicultural, where things can be interpreted or misinterpreted at a very, very easy level, but they all have to sort of unify and work together. How did you set up places where you're teaching or sort of educating everybody on a level too, so that they can comply with each other, and which helps the entire organism to work as one? How did you set that up and what were the challenges?
Communication.
Okay.
Communication is very key.
Okay.
There were a fair number of very large programs. I touched upon GDPR, for example. This was something that impacted the business across multiple jurisdictions. Not only that, but we had teams that were working in different countries to deliver that same piece. So we needed to make sure that these teams were actually talking to each other, that
In the
things were
same
not-
language.
Absolutely. But also so that things were not subject to interpretation, because somebody would say something and the other person hears something completely different. So often enough, what had to happen was we had to put things down in writing, making it absolutely very clear, and make sure that that there's no doubt.
Oof.
Of course, errors were made, and as a result of which, there was in some cases, a lot of rework that was needed. But over a period of time, and it's concerted effort. Everyone has to be determined to work together. You cannot have a team that throws up their hands in the air and says, I simply cannot handle this. That choice didn't exist.
Yeah, no tantrum.
None whatsoever.
Not
You've
gonna
got
do.
development teams who are delivering things that are based in India. You've got analysts that are based in the UK or in the US, and they have to talk. So what would happen is that obviously they can't sit next to each other. Conference calls, very key. Documents, very key. Of course, this was in the banking and IT industry, as a result of which it's always essential to have fairly detailed documentation. But as I said, communication, very important.
Wow.
And everyone takes responsibility. Nobody can say, I said that, you misheard or you misunderstood.
Right.
You make sure that what you are communicating has been understood.
Without a
without
level of
any-
doubt and misinterpretation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Very
mean, a
good.
lot of times we spend so much time talking about project management, and those are principles and frameworks. And of course, those frameworks are put in place, right? But remember the person delivering, that there is a softer aspect to it, right? So you might put in all the structures and processes, but how do you manage people?
Human beings, yeah.
Oof.
That is at
That's very
scale.
And at scale,
At
going
scale.
through their own, and we are shifty, moody as a species. We're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was quite a challenge, as a matter of fact, during the lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That
like
proven a
India,
whole
for
different-
example, announced lockdown, providing only 24 hours notice.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine?
So, and most of our teams were based in large campuses. We had close to about 15,000 individuals who have suddenly lost their, desktops, stuck at home. They have no technology to help, to assist them
Absolutely.
to work,
Yeah.
and we are still expecting them to work. But the most admirable thing was that working along, and I know this is completely offside, but working with the government, the organization managed to get close to 15,000 laptops
Wow.
fully equipped across to individuals in their homes.
Wow.
And then we had to make sure that we set up processes in place that would allow people to actually talk. Because now, not only have you got disparate teams across different countries, but now you've got individuals working out of their own homes
And then,
and trying to work. And because it was regulatory change, dates did not move. We had to still deliver.
shucks.
Yeah, nothing else. I mean, banking system didn't stop, right?
Yeah.
At the back end.
Am I audible was the most used
Yeah.
like, line.
Phrase. Yeah.
And then also now look at culture. So many people in India, most people are living with parents, old parents, young
Yeah,
kids,
yeah.
brother,
Very
uncle,
tough.
auntie. They've got one green screen behind
Yeah.
which there's cooking going on,
Yeah.
Yes.
and they're working.
Yes.
That may not be the same as in Europe where people have smaller families.
But
Yeah.
there was still a lot of leeway that was provided where a lot of individuals would say, I'm really sorry, but I only have one laptop. My child needs the laptop in order to do their studies.
Right.
So is it all right if I work in the night or in the evening? People worked crazy hours. And all of this was understanding the culture
Right.
that was.
Yeah, I mean, if
But
you
then
say,
you-
no, this is it, you've got to turn up.
You know what
That's
I
how-
love is it's all seeped at some level in empathy and a compassionate inquiry
Yes.
into
Yeah.
not saying no, this is it or you're out, which I hear a lot of.
I think a lot of that did change. I would say the pandemic definitely made people aware
Yeah.
across geographies.
Right.
Because having worked with international, and I've worked with now, 20, 30 nationalities, I've lost count. Earlier I used to count.
Wow.
And over
Crazy.
the last so many years, you work with them and you can see the difference. you can see that this little bit of that commonality has come in understanding and the little bit of kindness. But you do have the other extreme as well, that there is a thing of, I will only do this much. So you have that extreme also having come in a bit.
Have you seen that? You have a personal example of someone, some people or some organizations that just refuse to change. They've got their plans and how it backfires on them?
There are quite a few of those. Never name, because that's just not, we're not here to name and shame. We're more here about learning, right? And there were people who were extremely rigid about the way it has to be done. They lost top talent. And that top talent is not coming back. And the thing you've got to understand is that my way or the highway, or this is how I am, and this is how I will behave, and this is how I'll treat you. Great, it might have worked for you in the past because there were very few options. But today, and especially if it's good talent, in a minute they're gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
God,
then
people management.
Yeah, it's such a critical thing. Like we saw it. Like I was in Cadbury when Kraft took over. So I actually saw it now. These are two Western cultures, right? One's an American culture,
Very
one's a UK
very
culture.
different.
Very
You think
different.
that
You
there's
think
but
they're the
US
same,
and UK
but
are
they're
so
so
alike.
different. And it all came down to human beings in the end. So,
Egos and
just handling timelines and pressure in a different way. And obviously there's that whole sense of, like, with Cadbury and Kraft, there's a whole sense of this is such an old company that's being taken over now by the Americans. But eventually things worked out, I mean, I guess. But it's just that
journey, the transition.
we
I've done
sometimes,
post-merger integration for companies as well, and that's always a challenge.
yeah, we underestimate the human being element.
Right.
Like now, because of the way tech companies are taking over and AI is going to take over, people forget at the end of the day, the guy making the AI is a human being. Or guy or girl making the AI is a human being. So we forget that. And so, I mean, I think just don't underestimate the importance of that is the message.
It's the one thing that people don't see.
Yeah, they don't see.
And it's the biggest game changer.
Business is about people at the end of the day. Like,
And
my
people
business is
management.
a very people business,
Right.
It's people management at the end of the day. My team is what, like, the way my team has supported me through the lockdown and through COVID. I mean, if it hadn't been for that team, we would have shut down.
Yeah.
So it's all about the team. It's all about people. It's all about people, thinking about the company first, and that.
But then they got to feel like you've got their back too.
Yes, and
there's
that's
so
important.
many companies nowadays. Of course, earlier we used to hear one person has been in the same company for 30 years.
Exactly.
Now you don't. It's like 6 months.
Yeah.
Every 6-7 months, someone shifted.
That's
someone's
again a
gone.
big challenge that we're seeing with a certain generation.
That's a generational
That's
thing.
a generational
It's a
challenge
generational
where we're
thing,
saying where you want without the basics and the foundation. A lot of us you've heard about our foundations.
Yeah.
These are deep foundations, right?
Long time
That allows
spent.
you to take a lot more of the risks as well.
Right.
So you have to build a foundation. There's no escaping that.
Right.
Yeah, a building on a shaky foundation is going to fall.
Can't keep moving to the bigger, better deal
Yeah,
in life.
that's true.
Right. So I'm so excited to know you're doing so well. Now you've expanded to even Dubai. Where do you see the future of your company? How is expansion going to go? And in the world of sport and in different sports also, what do you see the future as?
Yeah, I mean, Cyrus, I think, as a company, as Bayside, we've gone through so many ups and downs in the recent past, but I see a very bright future for sports, both in India as well as globally. Sports technology is coming up in a big way. In the last couple of months, we've got a couple of sports tech companies that have been interested in coming to India and have asked us to partner with them. So now the challenge for me really is like to sieve out and see which are the right opportunities, right? Because you get a lot of people saying, I want to come to India, but maybe they're not the right, they're not at the right stage in their evolution to be here in India.
Right.
We're also getting a lot of inquiries into investment into Bayside,
Correct.
which is a good change to have rather than, me always having to knock on people's doors. So I think that's a good thing. And we're evaluating overseas opportunities ourselves as well.
Wow. It's super exciting, man. Where you go now, all the other choices.
Yeah.
Too much choice in which ones to go for is your problem. It's a good problem to have.
Absolutely. And that's where, Delna and Yasmin come in. People like that who've already lived that journey with so many other companies, So looking forward to some advice and help on how to get that.
I like the way you
After they
put that.
scared the life out of us.
Yes.
No, but Delna, I'll go to you because I've worked with you. I've seen how you work. And even in a small thing like an event, you talk about the problems that may occur and bring them up, which sometimes can feel like, oh, should we not do this, or should we just not put our chairs there, or should we not host the event because it may rain? But you do that because you're prepped for the tough times, and then it opens up. It's such an exciting time for the world. I want you to tell me, what are the basic things we should do so that companies can move out from here and other companies can come in from there? And then we've got people like you guys who have such strong expertise, who are actually also promoting a positive change which will impact generations and also how people work, since we spend such a large part of our lives at work. Who wants to live in a toxic environment where you're constantly misinterpreted and constantly walking on eggshells?
You know, while you're talking, I'm reminded of something that happened and it just came back to memory.
Yeah.
We had, when I was doing my Fulbright fellowship at Carnegie, we had this one session, right? And we were 29 of us, and apparently they were checking work-life balance. And those were some of the worst days, really tough days of my life, right? And yet I was the only one who scored some really high on this balance, right? Yeah. So they thought, why? And I said, but that's because I really enjoy what I do. So even when it's hard, right, you enjoy what you do.
But you don't enjoy everything of what you do, right?
Never. I mean, you can't get a constant.
That's another thing I found.
You can't get a constant high.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just weird.
You like this part of your job. There are some parts
I don't
you
like
don't
that.
like.
But you like. Yeah. I mean, at the end of it, are you in balance and enjoying? And a lot of what I try to tell people is that you enjoy business, you enjoy your career, you enjoy what you do. But enjoying is not being happy all the time. There's a difference, right?
Super true.
And for me, like what you said right now, my job has always been to find the dots and connect them. That's my joy. I love it, right? So, which is why I can see what will happen 3 steps ahead, 5 steps ahead, because that's really what I enjoy doing. I'm good at it.
Right.
I can see that picture. And so, yes, very often, like you said, in an event or something, I know that, okay, if you will not take care of this based on pattern recognition of the past, you're likely to have this problem. So let's just risk mitigate.
And you took calls, right? Which I really respect.
And for me, it's always going to be that. Does that mean that you shouldn't go ahead? Of course not. The entire conversation here is to say, go. Do it, right? Do it. The important thing is know why you're doing it, know yourself well enough, and then be agile. So a lot of times, as much as I hate the word pivot, because very often people are just pivoting, but here you have to be agile. So you have an idea, you are very clear on your product or your service fit, you know what you stand for, you know why you're going to the geography, there's a market, there's something you believe you will win, and you go with a little bit of that preparation. You do it. Build some revenue and success.
Okay.
Learn, repeat.
Right.
So what happens very often is, especially when we're talking of a certain size of organization, even the big ones have to do that, but the scale is a different scale, right? The important thing is know why you're doing it, be agile, learn from it, build some revenue, then go to the next level of growth.
Right.
Very often people don't do that. They go like guns blazing, without any understanding, without understanding culture, without understanding what will make you succeed, without the
shooting arrows everywhere.
And that doesn't.
Right.
So what you talk about, the fear that comes in, the fear comes in is because now you know so many things. You've gone through life, you had your ups and downs and failures. What is important to do is to actually say, okay, fine, what I know, how do I employ that to go ahead? Fear can't rule you. I mean, if there's anything in my life, I've always lived on the edge.
So fear has not been an overwhelming...
No, it was like this mantra. I read it somewhere in the early days of TV where it came, if you're not living on the edge, you're wasting space. So I kind of took it to heart.
Fab. And that's right. And it's hopeful. And now we have people like you.
Yeah, this is not so much about
Earlier, I don't
us,
know
right? It is about knowing that the help is required. Take it.
And
it doesn't have to be super expensive.
Yeah.
It has to be very targeted. Learn from people who've done this, who know the craft, but still the journey is alone. The buck stops with you, right? At the end of the day, you've got to do it. I mean, you're the head of the company. Whether in India, abroad, whether you with your family, the buck stops with you as a leader. So that's not going anywhere.
Correct.
But take the help along the way from people who get it. And again, I always say that people like me, not for the faint at heart, right? There might be somebody else with who you have a better value system match. So it's not like saying, oh, you know what, come to people like us.
No.
Find people who can help you.
No, I love
with
that about
who
you.
you have a value system match.
That's where it comes back to your desire and mission statement that you want to value add. You're saying do it with anyone you're comfortable with. Go to someone with good experience, but do it.
Yeah.
Don't not do it because you're gonna have a negative thought about something that could have been fine and smoother.
You have one life that you're conscious of.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not get into your past lives and how many times you've incarnated, right?
Yes.
You're conscious of this life. Make it count, no?
Nice. And take risks and have fun and calculate smart risks.
I mean, look at like about, in the 14th and 15th, 16th century, you had these sailors just taking off to explore the world, right? They had no Delna and Yasmin to help them. I mean, today we have everything, right? These guys were navigating by the stars.
No, and also, I have always found that I should create some safety. Just go with safety.
Yeah.
But that time, the safety in itself is the biggest lie. Yeah. Because actually it's just called not moving.
Yeah, it doesn't lead you to make a decision. No. Actually, the worst thing you can do as a business or an entrepreneur is not make a decision. Sometimes actually the decision might be don't go.
Yeah.
But it's a decision.
Exactly. And you work on that and then face the consequences.
But you don't know if you are not supposed to go, if you don't reach out, to people like Yasmin and Delna, or do your research,
Right.
So actually the scariest thing is Google. Like if you go to Google and you read,
you're telling me
that's the worst thing.
So I think it's the opposite problem. It's too much information is a curse. And we had none and now we have too much. So it's the anxiety of choice.
It's the anxiety of choice. It's like during the lockdown you had WhatsApp University where everyone was a medical
Everyone's a doctor, bro.
Based on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Now you have obviously Google also.
Yeah.
So I think there are informed individuals, experienced individuals, and if as an entrepreneur or as a company you're not making the most out of it, you're doing yourself a disservice.
And it removes trust, Like I had a friend who to surgery, maybe he's telling that guy, I don't know if this is the right bro.
Exactly.
Now you're going to direct this also.
Saying one thing at a human level, as an individual level, which applies overall as a principle as well. Even as individuals, your strength can easily become your weakness. Even as technology, the strength can become the weakness. It'll always come down to how you use it.
Yeah.
Today, because of information technology and many of these things that we're talking about, you have access to that information. They can reach and we reach out to them, right? But anything taken to an extreme will always backfire.
Yeah.
So that's really, at the end of the day, make informed choices. Find the
and
people
outsource your problems.
Yeah.
You can't be master in
outsource,
everything.
don't abdicate.
Explain.
Outsource your problems, don't abdicate the responsibility of the decision making and the execution.
So then educate yourself through that outsourced stuff.
Exactly.
Not
and
just
take
say
the
it's now.
responsibility to
Right.
actually see the results.
Right. And then whatever it is, it's yours.
Yeah.
And that's life. That's the beauty of it. No?
Yeah, you take ownership.
It's wonderful, this chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. This has been amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Yasmin,
We should
Delna.
do this constantly.
Thank you. We should.
Thanks, guys.